Got my confirmation
Uh,
that I'm recording.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
So today we have our discussion, Martin, Glenn, and me, myself, Arena. And we are going to go with the second attempt of our discussion on the topic of how to keep a healthy mind in the turbulent times of societal collapse or of civilization collapse. And we go through our introduction of ourselves first, because we seem to realize that perhaps we don't know much about each other, or we are not checking often on ourselves, so in some cases. And we would like to talk a bit about each other roles in our society, what we do, what background we have. And also we would like to evolve talking about our emotional status fears, because I think the fears, we think that fears are, talking about them is very also important, and maybe we can relate to each other and to the audience who are listening to us. So yeah, also let's start off with Martin. Let's go through what, Martin, you can share with us what you are, how you see yourself, and you can use the hints posted in the chat. Maybe they can help you. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Martin. I'm house sitting right now with a dog and a parakeet, parakeet, I think you say in English. And I consider myself an independent scientist. And the reason I use that term is that I'm not associated with an organization or a university. And probably the reason for that is the paradigms of what I want to work on. They're not common, and I haven't found anybody to prioritize the same things that I do. Recently, I've decided to try to find students to give a free course on what I call the ecocentric humanism worldview. So, and for that, of course, we'll have to define sustainability the right way, which is ecocentric. So it's a whole system. So it's not, again, what my master's degree that I had to fire was trying to teach us, that sustainability is anthropocentric. It's not species specific. It's a whole system concept for our planet. So they used to use the word sustainability when they were talking about sustainable practices or methods or behaviors, including the ones that would become more and more towards not being aggressors towards the world system that is part of what I would consider sustainability. So we can use the word sustainability for the whole world or for a particular system that are more or less closed if we define it as the whole, as all the elements included. So for me, there needs to be a big shift between thinking in an anthropocentric kind of way, which is, again, part of the monetary paradigm or the religious paradigms. So the supernatural or the magical, those two, I would name them. So for me, it's doing this for free, and it's a way to get people excited about learning things that are useful. And for me, I'll call it the Master of Science for Ecocentric Sustainability. And also, I'm doing this for free, but for me, it's also personal growth will be involved and potentially meeting others. So one of my fears in life is to not ever, make any friends or life partner that is a good fit for me because of the paradigms that I've decided to leave behind for newer ones. And as a social creature, that's pretty scary to know. Now, feeling alone has become an easier thing to do, but it's still not something that motivates me to want to live a very long time. So I'm still hoping to meet people that are like-minded. So everything I do, I guess, has some selfish needs in it, which are normal for a social creature, I would say, which is to not just meet people that claim to be like-minded, but like-behaved. It would be promoting different ways of thinking that are incorporating everything we do and every discussion type that we have. So that's who I am, and it's nice to be in a place where there's winter right now, in a place that is kind of relaxing, where I can catch up on some nice sleep and be responsible for some animals. So that's me. Thanks, Irina.
Okay, yeah, thanks for sharing. That was very brief and full of lot of context introduction. So yeah, Glenn, would you like to share the same? Thanks.
Yeah. 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 Thank you for that introduction. That was a substantial introduction. I could recognize a few things. Um, so I'm located in Norway and a little bit outside of Oslo. Live here with my girlfriend and cat. And I also would consider myself a kind of independent researcher, or it's hard to find the right word for it. Sometimes researcher, philosopher, explorer, and clearly into these same big questions about uh, the relationship between humans and the ecology, and how I could relate to the larger society, the larger planetary ecosystem in a beneficial way, and what are the possibilities that exist. I'm interested in many things related to this. Um, Everything from sort of first principles philosophically, whether there's some kind of fundamental philosophy that's perhaps already been invented, has to be rediscovered, or could be invented, which would help to unite humans all over the world and make us capable of understanding one another better, which is one of the big challenges I see, that it's very, very difficult to understand people, and especially when we try to speak on a somewhat higher level, um, and especially also when the topics can be quite emotionally um, full of content, what you could say, which obviously these larger issues about the future of the world is clearly also uh, emotional, and it touches many sides, one can say, of a person's being. So my greatest fear is related to a fear that there's a kind of madness that will take over in humanity, um, that sort of we go insane, uh, um, which perhaps we've done many times to some degree. Some degree we're already there, so it's hard to sort of define it, but it is a kind of you know, a fear that there will be this psychological collapse all over the world that's going to, you know, ruin all the great possibilities that exist. And so my personal view would obviously then be to just waste my own life and the contributions I could make. At the same time, I am a very optimistic minded person in various ways, in that I see also the situation as very dynamic and full of potential, that all people that I know, for example, and especially those I've gotten to know well, I've generally always discovered that they have a lot of wisdom when especially the situation can calm down. Sort of the context can be the right one. So I see people as being very dynamic, I guess, and sort of a work in progress. So my primary interest, I guess, would be in the field of consciousness in general. So I have been working with people for the last 15 years doing consciousness work, and that's been very rewarding. And now I'm also very interested in trying to do something similar with videos and to see if one can use conversations to open up a new understanding as well as build connections, which can also relieve these issues of loneliness, which I think are a very important, very big issue today. Many people feel isolated, and that also it can be an area where we can think together in new ways and build a vision of what's possible. Because this is also something I see is missing today in culture, a vision to inspire us. And I feel that that's something that would be perhaps very healing also emotionally, if people can really get together and explore what's really possible between humans. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it there.
Thanks for such a elaborative, going forward description and how you put yourself and you relate yourself to this kind of context. So yeah, that's interesting to understand more about like you and your background and your mindset, I would say. So it's just I'll try to just say a couple of things that what I've been up to this year is like I've been doing different things and they're quite different, but I think I would say this, I just I can't define myself as somebody or someone, but I just try what I can in different direction of education. Normally it's just volunteering projects, not only the nature environment, but also the social environment, social and behavioral stuff. Also in the field of science and teaching science, and specifically the scientific literacy or thinking, I would say, using my own material to children, because I think that children, they're just kind of like the hope of our society, and I think they need to have the training of the scientific mind, and that's what I'm trying to. I try to work with kids, and I do try to do it every day, but unless the school squeezes me in the framework of the traditional education. Yeah, so just some things I'm trying to do, also some kind of like research and consulting. Now it's doing consulting, so just jumping all around and trying to contribute as much as I can, like in different projects or different things. And yeah, so that's how I would define myself. I don't know. So yeah, and for kind of like the greatest fear that I have is I guess is ignorance. I really afraid of ignorance. I mean, my own ignorance maybe as well, but I kind of like celebrate my own ignorance more, because if I can learn something, like it's like if I'm ignorant about something, then I can learn about something. So it's kind of like a celebration by myself. But like the fear is that when you realize that that how much people, I don't know, like perhaps don't know, and they don't even know what that they don't know. So I guess I cannot even sometimes talk to people, and this is my own problem, that I need to kind of like to, you know, adjust to their understanding of the word. And I think this is the most challenging stuff, because, you know, it doesn't matter how much you read, doesn't matter how much you know, if you cannot pass on the knowledge to other people, and that's just empty. And so if you cannot reach out to people, right, and to kind of like, you know, I don't know, like to have a less fear of kind of like, I don't know, I wouldn't say, I'm not trying to say that people are ignorant. I just say that I don't know how to describe that. I think I have problem with that. I'm just afraid of ignorance, that our society is just like indulged in the false belief of something, and false beliefs of something, if they are not scientific evidence, leads normally to ignorance. And this is the pity, to lose the chance of having a more humanized society. By humanized, I mean the society that can learn and have a passion for learning and improve themselves. So that's what I'm not actually observing, and this is my greatest fear. So I don't know if that makes sense, so just tried it. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's a little related to the madness that I mentioned as well.
Both of what you said is similar to me and others, and it's just the way we've come to this process on our own and explain it differently. And sometimes we even think it's different things we're talking about when it's not. Glenn, for example, the madness you're talking about, it's something I realized when I was just a toddler. And my fear is not that we are going to or going not to. My fear is that the madness that's been already there when I was born and I've observing like adults, is that it's going to escalate. And one thing I did for me was to develop the thinking tools to be secure that my mind's going to be okay and that I'll be able to deal with people whose minds get worse. So that's given me that sense of security. And that's the kind of bachelor's degree that I would have loved to be giving with a university that would have collaborated with me when I first went to Vancouver Island. It was to, you know, maybe find a university at a strategic place on the planet that would have been able to create with me a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD in things that would make us human. And for me, that's where the hope lies, because you were mentioning hope, and I never really think about how to say that to people when I say what I want to work on, is the hope that we would actually be human. But to say that is to have people agree that we're not as human as we could be or should be, and that with rediscovering our humanity is where the hope is, the joy of lifelong learning. When there's so many generations now of people who are teaching very little themselves to their kids or their communities, and when that's been collective learning, a human concept for a long time that has not evolved with modernity, if I pronounce that properly. And so for me, the hope is the lifelong learning, is to live a life that resembles a rich quality connection type community with collaborations that is worthy of advanced social creatures. So for me, that's what would be so much better than the way we live now. And it'd be pursuing all sorts of topics to study and to, like astronomy or a different kind of arts, and just expand them in ways that would be phenomenal compared to what we've achieved in such a long period of time, is so little with the sciences and even the arts. And for me, that's where humanity really lies, this quality in a way that doesn't have a negative impact on the rest of the living globe. So you've given me kind of a way, Glenn, with your introduction to explain a little bit where the hope for me is, you know. And again, what do I get out of it? Well, then I get to meet more people to have good conversations with, or good quality connections and relationships with. So of course, wow, suddenly that'd be nice. And Irina, I'm glad that you also shared things about ignorance, you know, like Glenn was saying, madness. and I have my own terms, and people have their own terms. And it's been written down in my time capsule contribution a long time. Is people are enjoying zombie TV shows and zombie movies because unconsciously they all know. They might have not gotten to the process where they can explain it like us, that it's a fear, but they know something's happening where not only have we not reached a very high level of our evolution of our brains, but we're devolving at this current stage of a potentially changing paradigm. So it's nice to know that other people are realizing it, and it's nice to know that we can imagine something better, than just crashing and restarting the same way again. That there is more to being human than this. And Irina, thank you for doing all the work that you do to fight against, scientific illiteracy, because it's so important. And I know you've been talking to me for years about doing it as a volunteer, and how it's making you mad. You're passionate about it, about how much work there is to be done. And I appreciate that about you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for all that, Martin. I think this has been really great so far, because I picked up a theme that I think all of us are pointing towards, and it's, one could use the word madness or ignorance or confusion, and what it prevents is this study that you mentioned, lifelong learning and exploration of all kinds of interesting subjects, the arts, the sciences. Um, what you say, Irina, about if you celebrate your own ignorance, in a sense, this opens up a space for real research, a research which we can say is more in line with our real humanity. That it's a very natural thing to to always want to learn more, and to there's an expression, I think it sums it up well. The larger the island of knowledge, the longer the shoreline of wonder. And this, I think, describes what I would see as the true scientific mindset, or the knowledge-seeking mindset. But of course, the problem, I guess, is that this isn't institutionalized today, and it's sort of, it's an idea. It's sort of floating out there. We're talking about it here. Many others are as well, but there isn't any institutions or social systems that really embody this. I mean, there isn't a real university, might be a way to put it. So instead, all the institutions have become quite corrupted in various ways. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that, because that's one of the things I picked up so far. This that one of the things that seem to be lacking is this true learning, and this true exploration of what's true and real. And last time, for example, you mentioned, Martin, that one of the issues is that we don't have contact with reality, and like Irina just also said, there's all these beliefs, and it's almost like they cobble up the mind. It's like, and that prevents a real communication as well. So yeah, that definitely feels like something that we're all very interested in, and I believe that that's one of the things that would be very healing to us psychologically, and it would be very enlivening, and it's a great possibility that the internet obviously has opened in a very new way for this learning to be global. And perhaps video meetings like this might be a very central part of a new kind of science of the people. So yeah.
Thanks, Glenn. Irina, I just want to say that behind you on your right is a TV that's been turned on, and if you turn maybe a little bit to your right, we'll see mostly the curtain that's behind you over your left shoulder. So we won't be distracted by the TV a little bit. You don't have to turn it off if somebody else is watching it. Yeah, if you go a little bit more that way, we'll see just mostly the curtain. It'll be a less distracting background. Thank you. I'm glad. I don't know where you ended up going, maybe a little bit more, where you ended up going to get internet. It looks like, I don't know if you're in a hospital or something like that, but thanks for traveling to be able to connect with us wherever you went. I don't think you're home. Glenn, thanks for sharing that as well. I'm sorry, I just wanted to interrupt, but maybe Irina wanted to say something. But before I forget, I just want to say, Glenn, that Isaac Asimov, one of my favorite authors, had a short story called, I think, Nightfall. And he also made a longer version with another author, I think maybe Silverberg was his name. And it kind of talks about a society going crazy when all of the stars that their planets orbiting would all kind of go down at the same time, and they'd experience darkness for the first time in thousands of years. And you could see how their civilization collapses in ways that are interesting to study. So as to maybe kind of, you'd see maybe what causes that, or what kind of phenomenon you'd have to deal with if if the people go a little bit more mad. It's called Nightfall, that story. There's a shorter and a longer book version of it. Okay, thanks, Irina. Sorry I interrupted.
No, I was about to perhaps start off with the questions that we have on the agenda. So the first one is that how do we personally tackle staying strong? I mean, having still a strong mind when we see that and understand, realize that things fall apart for us in our own lives. It's not just observing the world around us only, but also like if things fall apart in our lives, how do we keep this kind of healthy and strong mind to tackle these difficulties?
Do you want to answer first, Irina?
I'll just keep the wave for other people first. That's it. Unless there is a silence. Yeah.
You want to ride the wave?
No, I didn't.
I can go first. It's a good question, and it makes me think this would be one that would trigger emotional reactions for me, because here's a way to say it: is I've sought out counseling many times in my life, and it was largely more positive than negative. Although I've had counselors for long periods that I say, hey, you've got too much the nurturing approach, and it was good at the beginning, but now I need a different approach. And that counselor was not able to adapt, but kind of went back to try another one I had before. But one time that was very disappointing is there was a psychiatrist who was a very young lady, and I'm not even sure she finished, and she was pregnant, and she was the new generation, and I was hoping that she would not be as old-fashioned, traditional, and outdated as the old psychiatrists. But she was already very elitist prone, and she was already kind of very rigid in her views, and yet she was the superior of an older psychiatric nurse who I could tell had good listening skills. And when they said, well, we can't give you that diagnosis, Martin, it doesn't exist in our book, would you agree getting a different diagnosis so that we can give you services? And I said, yeah, that's fine. But then I never heard back from them again. And I think, but I did say, because I think I criticized the psychiatrist a little bit too much when I gave praise to the older, and I would say just she's in her maybe her early 40s maybe, and the psychiatric lady that was pregnant was maybe like 26 or something. And I said, I could tell when I look in your eyes, the lady that was a psychiatric nurse, that you were shedding a tear, that you were starting to know what it feels like to be me, somebody that feels alone in this sense of the way I think and how it's so different from other people. And it makes me feel like, you know, I really don't belong to the same species as you. And that's why sometimes I claim I've speciated, and it's not because my genes are different. It's because my thinking tools are different. My worldview, my operating system is different. Well, when I told this lady, I said, you know what I need from somebody is I don't need somebody to specialize in the topics I talked about, is I need somebody with counseling skills 101. And you would think psychiatrists, you know, or most people that work in that field that have, you know, bachelor's degree or higher, they would have that, but they don't anymore. So I've lost faith in the medical system in many provinces in Canada, and including people that have master's degrees in counseling, and often done by a distance program like Athabasca. And they have very little, if no, counseling experience. And they're even intimidated and afraid to actually have real conversations with people. And yet they have a diploma on the wall. And yet the associations that accredits kind of counselors will give it to them because they have a master's degree. So for me, I've lost the ability to get help through our organizations and structures. And I mean, I could still find some. I've just given up hope trying because it's so draining. There's so many triggers now in trying again to find somebody. My triggers would make it worse before I found somebody. And I don't have any close friends to talk to. But what I'm disappointed about is I have a lot of tools of my own that I could use, such as walks in nature, you know, volunteering. Helping somebody else is very therapeutic. You know, there's a lot of things I could do, like yoga, meditation, you know, changing the way I eat, making sure my sleeping patterns are good. There's a lot of things, and yet I'm disappointed in myself because I'm not doing it enough. And I have the knowledge of what they are. I just don't have the motivation. And part of it is all the traumas of being shunned and discriminated against by the way I think or the way I act, that for me is more part of the solution than the problem. So for me, Irina, this question is tough because it's still unanswered. Is should I try to get more supports? Do I dare feeling disappointed by getting this support? Should I try to go deeper in myself to find out why I don't seem motivated to apply the skills that I have on my toolbox to take better care of myself, and yet I don't? I don't know. I think sometimes I'm always trying to recover, and it's not like just from regular physical sleep. It's just almost needing to come up with an explanation that it's okay to be who I am in a world like this, and that I can expect more triggers, and that I have to find ways to not realize that I won't get closure on a lot of past triggers, because for that I'd need to not get new ones that come in as quickly as the old ones get resolved by whatever counselor I might have a chance to get a good rapport with. So for me, it's a tough one. It's a tough one because I describe sometimes suffering from species alienation as having 90% of your energy to keep you between the extreme of extreme anger and extreme sadness that leads to depression. So 90% of my energy is just to keep me functional in the middle, to not go to those extremes. So far, I haven't come up with a way, but I did realize a full year ago that feeling alone, which is I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, is something that I've gotten used to, and that is easier to endure. But it's still, I mean, what kind of victory is that, you know? So it's kind of a tough one for me. It's a tough subject. So thanks, Irina, for bringing up this kind of self-disclosure that I think is right on the topic of what activists feel like. Imagine Greta, right, who's got all these followers and yet could have somebody that has more power or followers or people worship them say something totally ignorant about her and her life and what she does. Imagine what it would feel like for her And for that, we have to imagine that we are really not living in the same reality. We have such different worldviews about ourselves as a species, individuals, and the world we live in, that we can hurt each other in this way. And that people have this many followers here and here, and yet they see the world so differently. That is something that we should have been talking about a long time ago, because then we're not going to have so many activists feel alone. We're all going to be on the same page. There's a reality that, Irina, can be proven with science. So again, the worldview of science must come to dominate soon. And it's never dominated in the history of our species, which again, should we really deserve the term sapient? That's what I wanted to say about that. Thank you.
Whoa, yeah, this is this is a very big question, very relevant big question. I definitely feel inside and see with others that many are experiencing something similar to this, and especially the people who are most, let's say, eco-centered, or have an interest in evolution, could be another way of looking at it, and a tendency to want to challenge assumptions and challenge status quo, illusions, systems that are clearly quite dysfunctional. I've been like that since I was young, and like when I was a teenager, I was rebelling a lot. My way of doing it often would be sort of to retreat into a fantasy world, but it would also come out like I would say things about the media, etc. And then already then, I had some experiences with these almost like a wall. As so, but I mean, the question here, of course, is what is it that could help us? What could be helpful? So what I heard you mention, Martin, was therapy had been helpful, even if they didn't have the skills that you would have liked, but still, perhaps it was helpful. So, okay, what can I say has helped me? Well, there's a few things that have clearly been very helpful. I came in contact with a group of people about 15 years ago who are doing spiritual work, consciousness work, according to the Gurdjieff tradition. And so there I'm quite active, and we meet several times a week. And it's generally to meet and to be attentive to what's happening inside, and also share and question. And there's various other things too: music, dance, exercise, making meals together. It's almost like a social things, but it's all around this quest for knowing yourself better and learning more about one's psyche. And that has opened up a whole new world inside. And it's also it's somehow made me more empathetic towards all those other idiots, so to say, or ignorant people, or brainwashed people, or whatever we want to call them. And because I guess I've learned over time that many of them have a lot of wisdom that I'm not aware of, and that's hard for them to express, and that they're also very often trapped in some sense with many responsibilities, and it's not easy to balance all of this stuff. And So just having a little bit of empathy to the fact that sort of, let's say, playing mind-numbing video games, it's sort of insane, but it's also in a way understandable. And I'm also having the same issues. I should do more yoga. I should do more of this, and why not? And yeah, I mean that question is totally alive for me. So I don't have an answer to that, but it's been very helpful to be with other people in a context where we try to just understand better who we are and to see reality more clearly in a direct way, often without words. That has been very, very uh, healing and inspiring and opened up a whole new understanding of what's possible. And then there's also video meetings similar to this that I've been participating in for the last 2 years or so, maybe once or twice a week. And sometimes they're very different, very different. Sometimes, they're all over the place. But generally speaking, I do feel that has a very good effect because it makes me understand that there's a lot more people that are really having similar concerns, and that it certainly makes me feel less alone. And that there are indeed many who understand the need for, let's say, a new way of thinking, real science, eco consciousness, and yet for various reasons it's very difficult for them to live it out. So that reminds me actually of one of the conclusions I remember me and Martin came to in one of our talks, which was that there's a lot of people who have a lot of wisdom, but they're somehow incapable of manifesting it. And I feel that way too. So, but at the same time, you can get a little better, and that makes a big difference. So, and obviously, have a very, very positive relationship with my girlfriend here, and just I want to talk to about all kinds of things, and be loving. It's very, very, very positive, and it does give a lot of inner strength to sort of deal with this sense of unbelievable confusion, that's within the media, and and all of these activist groups who like so clearly they want the same thing, and they're just totally talking past one another, and they're somehow involved in some kind of game that's just completely not what they want to do and should do. So and that's definitely so. But I mean that what I would believe in then is it's really real community. It doesn't have to be that many people, but if you just have a few that you're keeping in regular contact with, sharing these things, and there's a learning, there's a development that happens. There's a magic to that. There's something really brilliant about that, and it's I personally think everybody has an interest in that if they were to really experience it. It might take many different forms, of course, but the commonality is just people getting together in attention and sincerely sharing and trying to understand better themselves and world in general, and what could be done, and create things together as well. And so I kind of feel I've been doing a little bit of that, but especially in terms of creating things, it's still at a very, very early stage. So it's like a lot more that I see could be done. And I also see a lot of like people who kind of want this, and also feel like isolated in some sense, or they feel they have these big ideas and they want the same, but it's how do you sort of organize all this? That's also a big challenge, especially like at scale. How can one have a conscious movement at scale, like, and work through all the issues that can come up? That's a big challenge. I don't have any final answer to it. Lots of ideas, of course, but definitely just being in the process, just being continuously in contact with people, exploring it. It's like a little drip of understanding every time, and that does make a big difference. It really does. Yeah.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, guys. That's quite um, a picture to get how you go through this kind of times, I would say, in your own lives. Yeah, that was interesting to know. So as for myself, I would say that like every time when because I think that when we think we have a need of strong or healthy mind is the time when we realize that our mind needs support. So and how to give our mind this kind of support. So you kind of like you need to reprogram your mind for focusing on something useful rather than focusing on something useless. Like, for example, it could be, I mean, by useless things, I'm not saying that they're completely useless, because sometimes when people, they feel emotional, right, they need to release their emotions, and so then they can be back on track. So emotions are also useful. I mean, we are like emotional creatures, and there wouldn't be, we wouldn't be here without emotions. But I mean, it's not going into the direction of having this kind of unsupportive mind all the time. So we need to find supported. And I kind of like used to this kind of techniques that I use with my mind to reprogram it and to divert it to the direction where I want it to be. So for example, I would remind myself about like the people who went even through harder times and tougher times, and they're the same people who, in the same category. I don't mean to categorize people. I mean, I just don't want people to take me wrong. But anyway, in the category or in the kind of like when they struggle through their lives, like they were alienated, like Martin said, or the majority just didn't understand their ideas. They're like, there's some people like that, and that's a pity that the ideas haven't been realized, because they couldn't tackle the majority of people, right? And to reach out to the degree so the majority could accept the ideas. So I just go to the philosophy and kind of like, remind myself how these people went through this kind of times. And I just find myself, of course, very small, because, it's kind of like, of course, looking up at people, but also admiring. I don't think it's a bad thing, but you can learn from people who you admire. But it's not like the God admiration or like worship God as admiration. Of course, it's not in this sense, but just simply you can learn from that. And one of the people who are actually like, I learned a lot, and also to use these techniques of reprogramming your brain or your mind and brain, therefore, is just to imagine the word, like whatever we get the information or whatever we see, is the word through our lenses, is the word through our emotions, is the word how we perceive it. it's not the reality, because we just see the words through our lenses, and the lenses of our value system or our perceptions or our experience, our background. So, and whatever we expect from the world, right, or from people like who we talk to, whatever, or we have a relationship with, is our own expectations. So like Jack Fresco said, is like, there's not the word that upsets you, is the expectation about the word, how you want it upsets you, your own expectations. And so when I go back to this kind of like, you know, people who, and see how they went through this kind of challenges to reprogramming their brain, you know, and turn it on again on the track to, you know, to do something useful, such as like, you know, keep going, just keep going, you know, keep forward. And, you know, like do something, right? Like whatever you guys said and mentioned, right? I would do also, like I would focus on volunteering. I would just kind of like squeeze myself and, you know, my effort and say like, yeah, I gotta do it, because like, you know, I see it can help someone, something. And of course, like there are some things like, you know, to just stabilize the emotional state and to keep it healthy. Like, for example, doing some art. I believe that, and scientifically proven that that people do art, like, you know, they can relieve their pressure, and they can stabilize the emotional state at that time. So I would be doing like dancing, because I also dance, and then I would see, okay, how can I do dancing more beneficial for something? And it keeps me like a double thing. I can do something beneficial, and I can also stabilize my emotional state through, like, you know, dancing, for example, right? So music dancing is all like good for brain work, I guess. So it's just like, you know, the way how I see it is, it's not like a remedy or something, but just a shared like what I would do. I don't know, or what I practice. Yeah.
Thanks, Irina. I don't know if Glenn ever did see videos of you dancing, but there's a dance you did with your boyfriend when you were visiting your mother's family that was kind of cut short because I think you had to practice it. And it's a song I didn't know, but I hear that song sometimes on the radio and it puts a smile on my face because it reminds me of that video where you were doing it all dressed nice, and it was in a place where there was this function for a celebration. And I don't know the name of the song. I'll send it to you, and I recommend you send it to Glenn. Glenn, you should see the talent she has and the energy when she's moving. And she does a lot of fast dancing. It's not like slow stuff. So it's very energetic. So of course the endorphins are going with the exercise of this. And it's a wonderful aspect of your life. I've always admired Irina. Thank you. What did I want to say? Oh yeah, you know, Irina, we can't live long and prosper without ever pursuing our emotional intelligence as well. So I think, you know, the new Star Trek series is going to demonstrate that, you know, you can't separate emotions from your life and be a stable person. So live long and prosper by always working on increasing emotional intelligence is what I believe in. And Glenn, you know, you were mentioning consciousness movements, and it makes me think of Greta again. And I think Greta, although she's associated more with climate, is she is at the forefront of a consciousness movement, and she is a role model, other than just acting in the common sense of what science is telling us, but also of sharing in a very mature way, I would say, at her age. For example, let's say she has a conflict with Trump. Then I can imagine what kind of silly responses Trump will have that are not human reactions, while she at her age will have human reactions. Will say how she feels about it. She'll say, you know, what she had to do to overcome, you know, defensiveness or whatever it is. She will actually be human in her response, and she'll explain it this way. So she's a great role model in this way as well. And she kind of bring accountability to things. Now, let's say I've run some what if scenarios in my head one time, and I said, what if Trump actually did a 180 and he would suddenly do these press conferences where he would say he was wrong, and he would actually be working with people to, you know, get counseling and learn better life skills and be in tune with himself, and want to pursue his personal development to the point that not just realizing he was wrong, but he would have to reprogram his brain to fit these new beliefs and this new worldview, saying he's been leading and the rest of his life would be dedicated to undoing the harm that his type of beliefs and memetics that he's been passing on has been harming. If this ever happened, then it's very possible that he would become a more positive force for change than Greta on a planet where this would happen, you know, in a parallel universe what if scenario. But you know, it's incredibly unlikely to happen. But we already have this great Greta that's role modeling a lot more than following the science. She's role modeling how to be human and how to be a responsible human. And that's a consciousness movement that I hope history will also give her credit for.
Yeah, and that thought experiment's very interesting. Like what, even if it sounds far-fetched, like what if someone like that were to really re-examine the whole worldview and sort of begin slate. That would be such a transformative thing, and it may happen, you know, with various people. But I'm also, that ties in with one idea that is the possibilities of storytelling. Like, for example, these what if scenarios. What if we made some of the what if scenarios very vivid as a story, and just play with it as a story which reveals a possibility. And if that story is shared, and especially if it can be shared in the right way, then that may make any of these possibilities suddenly happen to some extent. So the story could change reality. Well, this is an idea. It goes into very far-fetched areas, but I'm wondering, it's certainly one of those directions I'm very interested in.
I'm a fan of science fiction, like Irina is for sure, but the kind of non-science fiction that I would read, Glenn, would be the kind of fiction where authors are saying, what if, you know, Trump did a 180, or what if Hitler, based on his own psychohistory of how his mother died or what his upbringing was like or his childhood, his challenges, what if, you know, his life would have taken on different directions? Because we're still suffering today from the trauma of those wars, and people don't even realize that they're responding to things happening today in ways that are inappropriate because they still have those traumas in their heads from those long ago days. So books about this, what if that person hadn't died? What if that technology was the one that was subsidized instead of those ones? So that would make great books that would make people think not just we were just one tiny decision away to be this kind of society, but that we are still now one tiny decision away in our own individual lives from being these societies, and that the madness is so great that we don't even make these tiny little decisions. And that's sometimes all that it takes. It doesn't take somebody losing their entire family or everything they own to really become more part of the solution.
Yeah, exactly. Just one decision away from a totally new life. Isn't that a powerful?
Yeah, but many of those, thousands of those, but those decisions don't have to mean you cut your hand off. But there's got to be many of those. And for that, we need to understand. And by the way, if I would have associated with a university a long time ago, the bachelor's I wanted to create was related to the psychology of who we are, humanics. the masters is what and by the way, I'm skipping that one because I've tried a lot to give collaborative programs of Humanix and nobody's interested. Now I'm at the masters of ecocentric sustainability. But the third one, the PhD, would be socio-cybernetics, would be for us to take charge of our own destiny. And that idea of books like this would allow us that type of thinking and the thinking tools to realize what develops from this choice and what develops from this choice a lot more. It would become more intuitive for us.
And
yeah,
even
because
if just a few people did it, it will make a big difference.
I hope that authors would do this. And it's a very upsetting for me when I hear people say, if only we knew, if only we knew. You knew. The proof is there. You knew. You knew the science was there, the people were talking about it. You actually listened to the program with the people talking about it. You knew. So I hate hearing that when things get bad in the future. Oh, if only we knew. If only there was 6 billion Gretas instead of one. No, you could become a Greta too, just it's decisions.
I just want to kind of a little bit insert my own observation in the context, what you guys talking about, because I think it's quite relevant here. So I think that the idea of saying that that's what I'm going through as well, is that the challenge to bring science or it's not the science, you need to bring the understanding of particular science to people in order to reach them out. So you just don't bring the facts, the scientific evidence, but you need to reach them out in their own terms. And I found that is the most difficult task of when dealing with people, because just from quite recently yesterday observation, and it confirms all the many times to me, is that people see the science again through the lenses of their value system, right? So for example, because we humans tend to have our own agendas, and our agendas are reflected by our own value systems. If we see in the scientific report that, for example, there is a population, I would say, agenda, or how they call it, maybe it's the wrong word, that based on our way of life or our lifestyle, with the same economy running all around of consumptions and perpetuate growth of consumption of resources, we are not going to make it with the population that we have now. So, and then the politicians, or whatever they are, they come up with a control of the population that, you need to have less babies and blah, blah, blah. So what happens to people when those people see that as the contradiction and the system, a value system that they have been since they were children, or since they were the family, they cannot accept that fact of population control. I mean, that's just simplification, but population control, right? And what they do further, they reject in extreme cases, they reject the whole science of climate change. And it doesn't matter if you even tell them, last year was the consensus of 100%. Now it's not 97%, it's now 100% of scientists said that the climate change that we have in now has an anthropogenic connections relationship, rooted in anthropogenic, rooted. So I think that people have such different value system, and besides that, they have I call it, I don't know how to, because I just come up with this. Because I observed that is a value systems agenda. So if you're against the population control, you automatically, right? You find the science false, and you're trying to convince these people, it's not the 100% of scientists that agree on this kind of issue. So you reject science, right? In other words, you reject science because of your value systems agenda, or because maybe generally of your value system. As more value systems agendas you have that contradict the science, as more scientific evidence you will reject that. And this is like a common pattern that perhaps three of us maybe have observed when dealing with people and talking to them. So I'm not trying to state anything. I just trying to, I just shared that. And of course, I'm curious if you notice the same pattern or something in those terms. Yeah. So, and this is the most difficult task that needs to be tackled, because if we don't touch upon the value system of people, like it doesn't matter like how much science we can talk, and it doesn't matter how many graders we have, because you can have 1 billion graders. Yeah, great. Yeah, we will make a step forward, but we need to find a way how to touch upon the value systems of people. And how you're going to do that, that is a kind of a whole mystery to me, and that's what I'm also interested in.
Well, I can give a really short answer, so I'll go first. Irina, using the word control, and I don't know that it comes from you or from other people, but using the word control instead of management probably will trigger fears in people as if they're being controlled. But when it's the word management, it'd be more empowerment. And again, the bachelors or equivalent of a bachelor's in humanics would have helped us address these forms of thinking where we go against common sense and reality for our own, value system and its goals. The other thing I wanted to say is that, well, I forget now. So go ahead, Glenn. Maybe I'll come back to what I wanted to say about this. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what I heard there, obviously, the value systems of people, the agenda of the value systems. Can we touch that? Can we understand what those are? Yeah, that's a big question. One of the emergent ideas that I've discovered in, let's say, this field of people interested in similar things as us is an idea of creating kind of like profiles of people which bring forth their values and their purposes, what they believe in, what they wish for, what they're most interested in, a kind of way to understand their point of view. One thing, the problem or the big obstacle which Irina mentions seems to be that if they well, you can see through value systems, but you can also see it through group identity. I think that's also a very important part of the picture. So if I'll give an example. Like I heard some people talk about the Green Party and the climate hysterics, they call them. So their impression is that there's a hysteria about it, that there's misinformation about it, that somebody's trying to make people afraid, to make money off of, I don't know, climate taxes, whatever, and many other things, but also a sense that there's a kind of a fanaticism going on. Okay, let's say, so that's an impression that clearly many people have, where that impression is the factor that prevents them from taking this seriously, because so it seems to be a variation of, I can see there's some kind of confusion over there from those people who are saying there's something there I'm reacting towards, So therefore, I'm just going to write it all off. But is it possible to find a mind which can somehow hold that, yes, there is a confusion, yes, there is all that, and there's an incredibly important message that's within it that they're trying to bring forth? So can we cultivate a mind that can discern? It's one question. Right? So that might be a part of the answer. Another part would be perhaps to understand the values better. Yeah, go ahead, Mom.
If it's okay, Irina, I remembered what I wanted to finish up saying is that let's say I had a chance to be videotaped with Greta and Jane Goodall, and I had a whiteboard, and I would start from the beginning to see what they believe in, what they care about, what their value system is that at the beginning, they would probably agree, on a global scale, what what is a positive thing for life on this planet. And as we go down in the questions to see how to bring that about, then we would find where their divide is. And I could do this with you guys the next time if you wanted something like this as one of the maybe 3 questions. Maybe we could host one question each next time, and that could be mine. So I really respect Jane Goodall, what she did for for the academics that she was lacking, and she wasn't lacking because she because it was easy for her to go into academics in that era, but for what she did, the discipline, the risk she took to help us learn about chimpanzees, for example, is amazing. But I'm very disappointed in her. And of course, people see her as their grandma, so I just insulted their grandma. But I'm very disappointed because when she gets into climate change or even conservation, is she's disconnecting an entire generation from the reality of where things really are, because she is overprotective, let's say, of children's ability to handle with their resilience where they're really living. They're really living, and they're going to be the ones living in the next generation of a very, very harsh world compared to hers. And she's overly nurturing, and because of it, my opinion is she does more harm talking about these things. And probably her Jane Goodall foundations are also, they've become over nurturing and not preparing kids for what's really coming. While I believe Greta's ideas, or the way she talks about the same subject as Jane Goodall, is closer to reality. And what's even better is Greta is this young person, but she's this young person with very different parents than most other young people that might be joining the Jane Goodall Foundation have as parents. So I believe that Jane Goodall, the best thing she could be doing is just get us to look at ourselves from an outside perspective as primates. And that's really where, her specialty should be, and not doing the other thing, because the other thing, I believe she is doing more harm. And it's because of that. It's because she tries to put too much hope, and she becomes unscientific in the way that she does it. When kids are a lot more resilient than their adult or grandparents, parents or grandparents are. And she's taking that strength away from them by disconnecting them with reality to give them a nicer sense of where things are, which is not accurate. So again, for me, that's very harmful in the long term. It's very harmful. So that's an example of the value system and the agenda is, and of course, not every child in the world would be able to cope with suddenly being explained what is likely to come in future scenarios. But again, that now would motivate the parents and the grandparents to develop the thinking tools to be stronger and deal with reality in a way that you don't necessarily need to lose hope. And what is one of the best ways not to lose hope is working on the solutions to the reality that you live in. And even if progress is small, but working on solutions. And I think Irina, you agree with me now that it's mitigation. It's not It's not fixing things to the way they are. It's minimizing the damage that is coming to other species, to our planet in the long term. And I think you're with me there now, and you can correct me. So with Jane Goodall, we're not there at all. But with Greta, we're more like, this is very cruel what's happening, right? So it's a very different message. And yet they both, in my opinion, have critical thinking minds. So again, the the agenda that comes from the value system. And again, if I do this with you guys later, where you're both capable of critical thinking, we would see where these divides form. And this is the type of metapsychology that we need to have so that we can progress to a higher level of operating system up here. Because there is more of a right or wrong. You can't just say, oh, well, I have my view of seeing the world like this. And it's the same arguments I get into at badminton. And for example, no opposable thumbs, you got these different grips of the racket, very important. Your hips, your legs are attached to your hips, same way mine are. Gravity is the same on the other court. It's common sense, but people say, no, you have your style, I have my style. Well, this is a form of intellectual laziness, and it's often in this value system agenda. So in a way, she's tired, Jane Goodall. She's done a great life. She is a great person, but I believe now some of the things she's saying might be doing more harm than good. And it's because probably of her emotional energies right now. So she should be, in a way, focusing on other things with her followers. That's my opinion.
But
Okay, yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, well, was sort of, my question would be, one thing you said there was to talk about solutions. So that's where we need to be, in a solution space.
Yeah, just
So,
to a little bit to insert in that. So like it's actually based on our agenda and questions of our conversation. So just to interrupt a little bit is that so the question actually the second question is that we actually kind of like answered it when we were sharing about our personal, like how we relate ourselves to how we keep the healthy mind in our lives, because it's very also related to not only our personal lives but to the global issues, and we actually are part of that, and we are like kind of make a direct link. So the next question could be combined with that, and what Glenn actually started talking about the solutions is, but it's perhaps not more like a solution part, like we have solutions, like like we can propose them, but more like from your perspectives, like that's exactly the last question, that how would you impact the rate of change? It's like we are not like people who, I would say, like we can make a change, but it's like within the certain rate, because we like individuals. And so like the question would be like more, how would we impact, how would that impact the rate of change, of the social change, of the global change? How would you do that, from your individual efforts? I would say that. Is that okay, this to form this question?
So it's a question a little bit like, how would we impact the rate of change in the consciousness movement, so to say, or is that a little bit?
Yeah, like the rate of change, what we basically we need to put like we put in the efforts, the change, what we want to see, and make this change happen. So like from your perspective, how would you impact the rate of change, like with whatever you do, consciously work or whatever it is?
Okay, I'll try to give a response to that. It's obviously it's a very big question that I'm wondering about more or less continuously. One thing is what I've mentioned about just having regular contact with people where there's a consciousness evolution happening, even if it's just a relatively small group, that there's a certain development of understanding and let's say quality of being as well that we might develop, skills, etc. That would, I'm certain that impacts the whole world, even though it's clearly unmeasurable due to the complexity. But that it has an impact, I don't have any doubt about that. Just the three of us meeting here today has an impact, even if we can't measure it. And depending on sort of where the energy goes, has an impact. Okay, but then could there be, let's say, a larger impact, which is related to some of the challenges or problems or obstacles that has been pointed out? It's obviously a very big question. What are some of the obstacles? Well, one of the obstacles do seem to be that there's this lack of communication, of effective communication between these subcultures that are very concerned about the ecology and also concerned about evolution. And let's say the normal culture, the business as usual, the corporations, the politicians, the bureaucrats, and just the people who are so busy with everything, with children, with all kinds of daily occupations. That's an observation. There seems to be a disconnect between various of these groups in society where they're sort of going like this, and they're not really making any progress. So if that's turned around, obviously a big impact would happen if you could have, let's say, a movement like the Greta movement, who can then talk to politicians and with politicians and leaders, corporate leaders, etc., many others, be with them, and in a way which really creates a greater understanding that can be effectively transmitted. And some of these cultural divisions being broken down and a greater understanding happening between these subcultures. If that could happen, I'm sure there would be potentially an enormous impact. And so I'm really mentioning this because I see this as a real issue, that activists, they have a tendency to be very oppositional towards everything that's established. And it's a problem. I'm just saying it straight up. It creates obstacles to have this attitude. And it sometimes comes across as arrogance. And there's many, many aspects. Often it'll come across as ideological fanaticism. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because if this really is an obstacle, and seems to me clearly that it is, then clearly there has to be an opportunity. So the big issue then is there a way to really challenge the consensus and the existing leaders, etc., and their ideas and their behavior, but do it in a way which doesn't create this kind of opposition, this sort of trying to put them down. So when you, for example, mentioned Jane Goodall, what you mentioned a pattern of behavior that perhaps you think is not so beneficial. At the same time, there's who she is, what she has done, her finest moments, her various ideals, and you also did bring some of that across. Let's say we talk about someone like Donald Trump, many do. Like, is there a way to sort of talk about his behavior, certain behaviors which does not put down that, because there are some values, and there are some values in the movement that he's related to, and I would say there's a value of a sort of can-do attitude. For example, a sort of it's obviously much more complex, but the main theme is that if we understand the values of these different subcultures, then we may have an opportunity to connect with those values instead of sort of putting them down, sort of, because very often that's what happens, and that breaks down communication. So playing the blame game just doesn't seem to work. It has so an alternative to the blame game. Another way of framing it: could we find an alternative to the blame game where we could really bring in great big ideas, really challenging ideas, but in a way that inspires, uh, and sort of avoids all of these pitfalls. If that can be discovered, then that would impact the rate of change enormously. If we could have just 100 people who master this art, really master this art, I think the whole world, whole history would be changed. No question about it. We wouldn't be able to measure it, but it would be a totally different future if we had 100 people who were really conscious and could effectively communicate some of the possibilities. So that would be uh, one answer to how it could impact the rate of change. And it has to begin inside. It has to include me. So obviously, it has to be some really serious inner work, and challenging myself. I mean, if I'm going to play such a role. I also see this as a very long-term project because it's a very big, it's big themes. I've got a big dream, and if that dream happens 10,000 years into the future, then I'm very, very happy, and nothing will have been wasted. Yeah.
It's nice to hear that, Glenn, that solutions you might be working on and the butterfly effect might be way past your lifetime. Not a lot of people have that type of wisdom, that they would make choices in their lives to not see the measurable impact in their lives or even in their children's lives. That's a type of responsibility and your wisdom I appreciate. And it was nice, Glenn, to also hear for the first time how supportive the conversations with your girlfriend are to you. I didn't know about that. Thanks for sharing that. I've recently talked to somebody at Badminton about Trump, and I kind of hoped that he would win again. And it's not because I think he's a great human being. It's because out of the choices of who there would be, is he would have the most beneficial outcomes to the culture. And although you would think he would promote redneckism, as being the king of the rednecks, I call him, in his culture, as I believe that he would make people fall on the other side of the fence of redneckism a lot more than the other participants would, because of you know, the phenomenon of having people look at themselves in the mirror, say, is this really who we want our country to sound like, you know? And when it comes to the divide between activists, Glenn, I think that a lot of it again goes back to the value system agenda. And again, when we start from the top and we go back to the top saying, oh, when we find a divide down here, oh, then we bring back, oh, didn't we agree to that we both wanted this for our planet, for all life on the planet? Well, then are we really divided here? Let's find the science to show how to reconnect, or to show which is the better outcome. And that's a form of critical thinking that we need to do, that because it incorporates our metapsychology too. And that's important as well. And for me, again, I really admire what Jane Goodall has done. And again, I just am pointing out what's in the long term with her approach. Is I think that there's good things she does for kids, but it's not as beneficial as it could be. But again, it's what she believes they're capable of. So again, who's right, who's wrong? Well, both are right or wrong. But I think still that I would go more in a different direction. So, Irina, if I go back to your question, is Like some years ago, I went to Kamloops, British Columbia. There was a conference called Imagine No Religion 4. It was the fourth one. There was a lady who was in charge of the, I think, imaging team for the probe that was going around Saturn, I think, and she had a great presentation, and it linked the beginning of and the end of her presentation was great. It was astronomy related, but it was also how we see ourselves as a species. But there was also two people, I think, and I'd have to look, and I don't know if one was a pastor, one was a priest, I'm not sure, but they were people that were religious and they had followers, and they were very beneficial to their followers because they're good people and they would give maybe advice or counseling. But eventually they had a change of worldview, and they just realized, yeah, no, I'm not a religious person anymore. So of course they were shunned by their entire community, and that's one of the things that is a trauma that I will probably never get over. Is when I decided I'm closing down my driving school, I'm moving away from a small town that has no more potential for personal development for me, is so many hundreds of people I cared about and I devoted so much to have shunned me and discriminated against me since then. As I understood how they felt, these people that moved away from the religious paradigm and to promote different things. I'd probably have people follow or respect them now, but it's probably a smaller number of people, but they had to be who they. Now, what happened in their heads is it takes so much courage to actually have done this, to disconnect from an entire community where they had, a respectful and authority and elite type position, but they were doing a lot of good. But they believe maybe that's not really what reality was like. So to do this is, I think I identify with this in a way that for what I can do in my life, I think to be part of the solution is also like Glenn, that I'm not going to see any results in my lifetime. And for me, how much of it was done consciously or not, is I believe that the paradigms I operate in is my strength, but it's also the hardest thing on my life for a social creature. And I don't think that I will be able to have much of an impact, but if I document things, if I video record things to be learned from in the future, or a book, is even though they read it too little too late, but it's even too little too late when I was born to actually pass on these things, is at least that I'd be contributing to the advancement of metapsychology in the future. And I define this, because there's different definitions of it, as the ability we have to observe our own thoughts and feelings and internal processes in this way. So I believe this should grow a lot, and it would help in so many different things, such as becoming better critical thinkers, being able to identify the value system agendas and how they appear to be that we're in conflict when we're not always in conflict. So this is my strength, I believe, and if I didn't have this, then I would maybe go out and petition for climate emergency plans for my government or things like that. I do have connections in the government or in the media or in politics in my family relations, but I'm not going to go there because it's not my strength, and it's just going to create an even bigger divide with my family, which is not very close anyway. So I don't need to do that. So for me, it's to actually pursue these things, and whether I see in my lifetime or not is not how I evaluate when I die, and my brain is evaluating myself based on my own intelligence, on my own paradigms. And if I've been more part of the solution than the problem, is I know that what I'm working on is I'm going to get my passing grade more than just. But again, just quickly to say is, and I'm disappointed myself, but aside from overpopulation, which is the most important thing to be working on, and there's very humane ways to do this that are a lot more humane than the inhumane ignoring of this thing that's going to be forced onto us in a very natural world kind of way in the future, that's going to be a lot less humane. Is there's also the fact that I would love to become a vegetarian, but I'm still, because of a lack of good social connections in my life, and I'm very disappointed in myself in this, is I'm still eating for emotional reasons, which, with my background includes meat. And I wish that wasn't it, because I have the science to know that I don't need to go there, but it's a hard one for me. So I hope I hope that I will change this in the future, but I kind of use the excuse. I wish I met a girlfriend who already has great recipes and who knows everything, and I've just kind of slowly be learning this at a pace that I could handle with everything else I'm working on. But you know, that might never happen. So I need to do that progress of moving away from the meat-based diet so much. Um, so that's what I'm working on. Things that are long term, you know, that eventually would be, you know, these bachelor's, master's, or PhD equivalents. Although I don't want to call them that, but they do need to come in a certain sequence. Like even if I get students who do the masters of ecocentric sustainability, is I know I'll have to incorporate some of the Humanix program from what would have come before that, because the sequence is important to reach different levels of thinking, operating systems, and thinking tools to be as efficient as possible. I'm not going to see much progress of this in my lifetime, but I'm still wanting to leave something for future generations that may or may not be overlooked. And it's not my job when I'm dead to see if it's overlooked or not. It's just the best I can do in my lifetime. And that's enough for me. That's enough for me to know that on my deathbed, I'll probably be alone, and I'll be, if I'm on a bed, and I'll be patting myself on the back and say, I don't know if anybody ever felt alone as much as you did, Martin, but that's not important. But I know that it was always important since I was a little boy to do the right thing. That's always been more important to me. And my life got very, very complex. But if I evaluate my life by doing the right thing, um, especially when it was so much easier to just blend into the norm, then I'll be very, very proud of myself. Irina, did you answer that same question?
Yeah, I mean, is I understand this is a hard question, and it's quite challenging. I mean, there is no specific answer to that, right? It's kind of like an ongoing process. But first of all, like I would like to thank you guys for sharing. You know, that was quite a lot to learn, not like just about you, but to learn new ways and perspectives of looking even at these questions, because I would perhaps look at this question from a different point of view. And it's really interesting to, you know, to see how also other people interpret the same questions, and you get like lots of information that or perspectives that you've never come up with. So I just want to thank you for that. Like I just want to say like how I see this question, right? So like that's why it's kind of like, how would you impact the rate of change? So by the impact, of course, I mean also individual efforts, but as well, like what would you do, like if you have a passion for something, for doing that? So what will be the best part to put your passion to? So I think that's where you get the best fruits of your work. I don't know, it's just that based on my experience. If you do something for, it doesn't mean that you have to do everything like with passion, right? Like I like this, so I do this. I think that there is also a part of responsibility. Like for example, I do some stuff with translation, and I'm not really passionate about it, but I do that because I think it's responsibility to bring the message in the Chinese, or the same message, because people don't understand the local language. But it's not really my passion. So I see this question as a kind of like, you know, how do you apply the best part of your passion, and then you ripen of this best part. So again, I like you guys. I'm not interested in wrapping this fruit like during my lifetime. I'm not even thinking about it because, but that's why like I also, you know, like think that maybe there are some material or like, you know, articles, whatever we can make it up for people to see or to get something out from that, or the videos, whatever it is, or whatever, like a lecture on seminars. So, and I think as from my point of view, I don't I don't commit to that part a lot, and that's my challenge that I have. I think I should do it more. So this is the part of, you know, living something of yourself, but not not in with the purpose to find like, oh, you know, there is your name, and in the future somebody will remember that name. Like, no names, like, you know,
Would
no
it be
real names.
Irina or would it be Earth Girl if we see?
Yeah, that's why I have different names, you know, like I don't really care, you know. So what I care is about, like, if people get out from something out from it. um so and so as for individual efforts is like this, and I just want to, it's quite similar to what you guys talked already about, and I just, like, you know, joining you in that. But just for my part, I would do it like best of my passion. I would just determine where I can put the best of my passion and focus on these parts. And this is challenging for me because I am a multitask person, and sometimes I just go in different directions and try to do little by little. But it's also challenging for me because I gotta do something from the beginning and from the end, and this is also will be like a new challenge for me that I look forward to. So that's how I would interpret the question. And just a couple of things to finish
Wait,
that is
Irina,
that
Irina, what are your passions? For example, I think when you said earlier you try to work with kids every day, that's got to be one of your passions, education with kids. But can you name what your passions are?
so my passion is, yes, is in education, like in passing down the the tools and knowledge of you know, and getting people to absorb it, you know. If I say that people can absorb it, that's like, oh yeah, I've done something useful. So that's what my passion is. Yeah, let's put it like
So
this. Yeah, I,
passing down some tools that will be noticeable
people can use.
whether it's with kids or not. Okay. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
yes, 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 yeah. Tools and knowledge, and spreading the awareness basically is also like a a consciousness shift. So that's, I'm also interested in how to reach out to people and to, in their terms, like to get them to observe. It's also, that's why I want to join in with what Glenn said, you know. And the separation of activists, and I've been participating in several activist projects, and I can see it. It's like, it's not only the polarization between, like, you know, what we guys doing, and the, for example, the balance of powers. I mean, the powerful people, whatever, politicians, or it's also like within their activist group, and it's all over the world. And I mean, it's the same. It's interesting how to connect ourselves, and how to connect to those in power. Was what Glenn mentioned, is that it's really a hard task, but at the same time it's challenging, and we need to speak to them. It's otherwise we just promote the same polarization against them, because we are creating that, or we blame someone for something, right? And it creates automatically polarization between, and there is no bridge. So bridging differences, I think, is the hardest task of all. Between people, it doesn't matter what kind of people, like bridging differences between people, I think, is the hardest task.
Well, Irina, you are different than us here, and this might not be something you were striving for, but more than 3 years ago, when I noticed you on Facebook, when I was doing research in the north of Ontario independently again, is I've been following a lot of your posts. I've never disconnected from you and what you're doing. And I would say that you've achieved a lot of your passion and your goals in your lifetime. So congratulations. You've had a very big impact on a lot of people. So you have measurable impact in your lifetime. So congratulations. Whether you were aiming for your lifetime or not, you're making progress with a lot of people with raising awareness. So congratulations. I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah,
Okay.
to say thanks. I don't know what to say, because it's, for me, it's just, kind of like, it's just like, it's like whatever I can, let's just do it. It's
I wish your dad would know, because he'd be proud of the scientist that you'd become, and that you became largely on your own. This amazing impact scientist on your own. So I'm proud of you.
I don't think that it's my own. Like, I do believe that people like that. I've been influenced by lots of people, and it's just like, I think it's just a little part, and we, like, all of us could do like more, just like what you guys mentioned. Like, I know I can do that. And like, for me, myself as well, I think, like, I know many, like, the thing that with multitasking or whatever it is, I know I can do that, right? I just need to put like more efforts to do that. And I just like to, like, to also glad to meet you guys and other people, of course, in that direction. And I think we can just become more stronger in that. And we, like what you, Martin, said, will be a very great exercise to sit down to see how, like, and how we divide it. That would be like a very cool thing to do. Like, if 3 of us or people will join, like, I think it's a good time a good start to begin with something.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And um, I have to leave in not so long, but it's been really happy about today. And also glad, by the way, you mentioned this with multitasking, because I think that's another thing that is a very common theme, especially among there's certain kinds of people interested in these questions. It's definitely a challenge to have a focus from the beginning to the end, when one's interests are really in all directions. I mean, it's really, we're real generalists in the full sense of the word, and that has its own peculiar challenges in terms of being disciplined, which are also I think it's very interesting to look at, because it's like, if we could, let's say, use multitasking, our natural tendency to multitask, and tendency to be interested in many things and be passionate about many things, maybe that could be channeled in a way that could, over time, create something. So that's a whole big question in itself that sort of like come up. I'm just wanting to point that out. I don't think we're going to answer that today. And my passion, I also think that's a very great focus, really. What is, like, each person's unique passion? And I have a great passion for discovery, I would say, and for the connection between what is real and what is possible. That there's something about that interface of really trying to come in contact with reality really directly and really truthfully, and how somehow that reveals possibilities. That's a great passion for me. I think it relates to all the themes we discussed today. So this has been really fruitful for me. I mean, it's a great inspiration to just meet like this and really talk over this and reflect on it. It brings clarity and a lot of inspiration. So thanks a lot to both of you. I definitely love to continue this exploration.
Can I wrap up my part before Irina? Irina, thanks. At the beginning, you said the second attempt, you know, because we all admitted it was kind of awkward the first time we met. And I think that, Glenn, you want to help kind of unite activists too. And I think one way we can get our talks, and I'd love to continue with you two as well, is to really request more comments from people. Like, how would you answer this question? How would you interpret this question? What are the things you got the most out of this video? It really got people to really get involved in it more, and to also kind of get them to say more about it, because there's very little comments, I think. And of course, we have to keep our videos short. There's a guy on Facebook recently that I said I'd like to have a live chat with you. And one of the things I want to ask is, he has a shorter video, like 3 minutes and something, and then a longer one, which is just 6 minutes. And his 6 minutes, I think, had 100 views, and his 3 minutes something had 1,000 views. Now, they're not in the same social media setting, but still you could see the attention span of people, right? On how even from 3 minutes, and I asked my family members, did you look at this video that is 3 minutes, 30 seconds long? And no, they didn't go through the whole thing. So I think get them to participate more. So, you know, give them a motivation to pay attention, and to also provide advice, feedback, and things like this. And if we talk about sustainability honestly, then it doesn't mean you exclude the human component to it, because the human condition is an important thing. And I think we role modeled it here with our self-disclosure. So we are part of this great sustainability, you know, cybernetic global system that has been around since even before any kind of primates came. But the human condition is not something we need to ignore. We should ignore. We should include this metapsychology in all of our talks. And this will make us really the generalists, you know, specialists in every topic we need to be to really connect on the same page. And thank you very much. So again, just encouraging wherever you post this, more and more comments, and bringing the comments back in the next time. And I would like to do that thing next time if you're suggesting that question for me, Irina. Thank you. Thank you for hosting today, Irina.
Yeah, like, well, I think Glenn and me both for hosting, but yeah, yeah, you're very welcome. And I also want to thank everyone again that for participating. That I think we could, you know, come up with a following up part. And if you're all interested to continue the conversation in that direction, I think little by little we don't have to push ourselves so much, but little by little we can build something. Some coming up with tools and sharing more constructive tools and giving to people and sharing our experience. I think it's also already one of the good starts off. And I agree with Martin that could be, we should ask people for more participation, and that since the short, I mean, yes, the span of people's attention seems to become shorter and shorter. But anyway, we can also think on how to cut off the video in different parts, and also could be shared like short videos could be shown instead of having like a long video. Yeah, that's what we can discuss later. Yeah. So yeah, we are over the time, and
great. So we just have to remember to stop recording before
we're doing the countdown to stop recording. So thank you to both of you as well. And we're going 3, 2, 1.